2020 was terrible. COVID, locked down in a room, stuck playing NBA 2K20, FIFA 20, and F1 2019. At least the Twitch Quadret was peak. I really want that to return. Every single sports league you can think of was cancelled. Concerts were cancelled. School was cancelled. Work was cancelled. In fact, cancelling people became a thing. But after 3 months of hell, sports were back. You know, the NBA had their bubble thingy. And then football had empty stadium. You know, the Lakers win the Mickey Mouse ring. I don't think it's a Mickey Mouse ring. I think it's a legitimate ring. And then Arsenal somehow won the FA Cup. Lockdown Arsenal, let it be. Then Barcelona, Bayern Munich. Don't remind me of that. Yeah, sports was interesting without fans. But how about in the world of F1? There would also be no fans at the races, apart from a select few. I'm pretty sure Portugal had fans, Turkey had fans. I'm pretty sure Turkey were selling tickets for like 15 euros, damn. And I'm also pretty sure this was the only sports league in 2020 that allowed fans. I have to go look that up. But today we're not going to be talking about the F1 2020 season on its own. That could be its own video. We're talking about Imola's return to F1, which happened back in 2020. And now, because some countries had stricter social distancing regulations to others, F1 had to cancel their races there. Every single Asian country, apart from the Middle Eastern races. Obviously, street circuit races had to be cancelled. You don't want to be abrupting a city. But that'll be a pretty interesting prospect. Imagine you're having an online class, and in your basement lobby, the W11 is steaming by. But since some races had to be cancelled, there were a few tracks that were brought in, and a few weird instances here and there. For example, 2 races in Austria and 2 races in Britain, 2 races in Bahrain as well, but one of them was on the outer layout, which made for some really great high-speed racing. Please bring this layout back, Bahrain. Turkey was a weird one, not because of the actual racing itself. It's not an obscure track. It hosted F1 races before, but because the track wasn't even ready, and they had... Yeah, it's a long story. We're going to be focusing on Imola today, since this week is the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, and Imola returned to the F1 calendar in 2020 and hasn't left since, and people thought it would be a temporary track at the time. Now it's pretty much a permanent track on the calendar. So here we go. F1's strange return to Imola. Now, before 2020, Imola hasn't been on the calendar since 2006. And the gap between 2006 and 2020 was a pretty long time. Sure, it's only 14 years, but quite a lot of things happened. Kimi Antonelli was born. Think about that. Leo Block was born too. I was born 2007. I went to my first F1 race. LeBron left the Cavaliers, joined the Miami Heat, left the Miami Heat to join the Cavaliers again, left the Cavaliers again to join the Los Angeles Lakers. Messi lost 3 international finals. Ronaldo won a 3-peat. Lewis Hamilton became the first ever black driver in F1 history, became the first ever black champion in F1 history. Kimi Raikkonen wins the championship, Ferrari's last champ. A lot of things happened in between Imola's last appearance and the return in 2020. In fact, this scene from Mini Drivers captures what I'm trying to say perfectly.
In the last race I was 8 years old. And I was 12. Whoa, last time I was 5.
On the road to 10K, so be sure to subscribe. And let's also try to get to 300 on Instagram. We already hit 200. So yeah, let's try and hit 300. But finally, after this long wait, we returned to Imola. Gasly had a really cool helmet commemorating Senna, as well as the trophy marking Tamburello Corner. Nothing much happened in free practice apart from Carlos Sainz preparing his 2022 gravel addiction 2 years earlier. So let's just jump straight into qualifying. In Q1, George Russell somehow made it out of the bottom 5. And Kevin Magnussen turned into 2022 Carlos Sainz. I know, same joke twice in a row, but I don't care if it's old. In Q2, Sebastian Vettel gets knocked out, pretty standard for 2027, alongside both of the racing points, very surprisingly. And George Russell qualifies P14 ahead of Lance Stroll. Well, that's quite expected, isn't that? And somehow Pierre Gasly finds himself in the top 3. In Q3, I missed the old track limits. You can see them pushing the car a lot more than they are now. After the first set of runs, Lewis Hamilton ends up on provisional pole, 0.03 of a second ahead of Valtteri Bottas. And Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri splits the 2 Red Bulls. Now time for the second runs. Alex Albon improves on his time and is no longer behind Pierre Gasly, but Daniel Ricciardo is already in P4, so he's the one splitting the 2 Red Bulls now. Lewis Hamilton made a few mistakes on his lap, but is able to clutch up into Sector 3 and puts it on provisional pole. But that won't matter because because with the purple Sector 1 and Sector 3 from Bottas, Bottas is now the one on pole position. And Max Verstappen doesn't improve his position and remains in P3. Oh yeah, Pierre Gasly got Alex Albon back. Damn it. So your front 10 for the 2020 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix is Valtteri Bottas, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly, Daniel Ricciardo, Alex Albon, Charles Leclerc, Danny Kvyat, Lando Norris, and Carlos Sainz. And Pierre Gasly starting in P4, this could be pretty interesting considering earlier in the year he did win an Italian race, so there was a chance he could finish on the podium in this one.
After all that,
Martin Brundle, we're back in Italy and we're back in Imola. Isn't it brilliant?
Yes, unusual, isn't it, to be 3 times in the same country?
Well, I mean, it's not very unusual anymore. Now, when the race started, Lewis Hamilton actually had a pretty poor start, dropping from P2 to P3, and Daniel Ricciardo is able to jump Pierre Gasly and gets up into P4, and nearly gets Lewis Hamilton into the first chicane, but Hamilton's able to block off his line. And there was actually quite a few interesting things happening in the midfield. For starters, Lance Stroll clips the rear right tire of Esteban Ocon, loses his front wing, and comes into the pits by the end of the lap. Sebastian Vettel had a terrible start, losing 2 positions on the main straight, locks up 2 separate times in a single corner, and does this incredible move on Kevin Magnussen. And the race from here on out would just be very, very quiet. Lewis couldn't exactly get Verstappen because he was stuck in his dirty air because Bottas couldn't pull away a gap somehow. And if you look at this segment again, why isn't that cleared yet? It's already lap 4. Carlos Sainz is a textbook DRS overtake on Lando Norris. This would totally change the projection of this race going forward. And after qualifying P4, Pierre Gasly unfortunately had to retire from Imola. Looking at how this race panned out, he definitely would have finished on the podium. And with Gasly retiring, it was now Kvyat's time to show why Red Bull should have picked him over Alex. And no, this race is pure train. What do you expect from Imola? It's like a glorified Monaco. I want to go on a bit of a rant here. Do I think Imola should still be on the calendar? No. Because I'm not really a fan of this track. It's fun to drive on the F1 games for sure. But the races here aren't really that interesting. 2021 and 2022 were pretty good. But there's a reason why it left the calendar anyways. Because the racing is mid. I would rather have Mugello than Imola. I would rather have another European track than Imola. I'd rather have Hockenheim than Imola. Or Nürburgring than Imola. But this track for F1 isn't the greatest. It's just Monaco, but with grass. You're probably wondering why I'm calling this F1 Strange Return to Imola. Don't worry, we're gonna get to that right now. So Max Verstappen opens the pit window for the frontrunners, attempting to pull the undercut on Valtteri Bottas. Mercedes respond in the following lap, boxing Bottas for the hard tires, whilst they let Lewis go long. Now at this point you're probably thinking maybe Verstappen and Bottas have successfully secured P1 and P2 because Lewis is going for the alternate strategy. Well, it turns out Lewis is actually going faster than them on old rubber right now. He gained 1.8 seconds in the span of 2 laps. Verstappen is constantly putting the pressure on Bottas, but he just really can't overtake him because, as I said, Imola is a glorified Monaco. And even though Mans was on used rubber, he was constantly setting fastest lap after fastest lap. In fact, after Bottas pit, the lead was 22 seconds, now it's at 26 seconds. Yeah, those hards were just not heating up that day. And then this happened.
Oh, and that's Esteban Ocon pulling off and pulling out.
Lewis had the perfect opportunity to pit under the VSC because look at that, the delta was only 17 seconds. And look, he's now 6 seconds ahead of Valtteri Bottas. Now since both Max and Bottas shot the win was officially over, they were still chasing each other. It was still a pretty tough battle, primarily for Max and Bottas trying to keep him behind. And oh, look at this, Ferrari messing up a pit stop. What's new? 13 seconds, damn. Lap 43, Valtteri Bottas locks up going to Rivazza. Max Verstappen gets a good run. Can't really get him at first, but on the DRS zone, textbook overtake round the outside. And Verstappen's now up into P2. And after this, it was a pretty calm race. You know, nothing much happening, you know. We had some action here and there, but we don't need the entire race to be full of action. It was a decent return back to Imola.
Oh dear, that's Max Verstappen. As you can see, right rear tyre has gone completely. What has happened?
Well, that would add something.
Another one bites the dust.
I love watching the birth of memes in real time.
He tried to kill me with a forklift. Olé!
Well, 6 safety car laps later, and time for the final 6 laps of this race. Oh, Lewis and Valtteri go to a different stratosphere already. Well, that would have been interesting. Never mind, we have some action. Alex dropping it completely on his own, and Carlos Sainz having a better reaction time than Bottas in 2017. On the exit of Tosa, Danny Kvyat gets a really good run on Charles Leclerc, goes around him on the outside of Piratella. Leclerc runs wide for some reason, and now Kvyat has sight on the podium. And the final 4 laps of this race was a defensive masterclass from Charles Leclerc, somehow able to keep Perez behind in a much faster car, so props to him. And after the most random Grand Prix of all time, Lewis Hamilton crosses the line and wins the 2020 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix while setting the fastest lap simultaneously and secures the World Constructors' Championship for Mercedes. Daniel Ricciardo finishes in P3, and Nicholas Latifi was 1 position away from scoring points in his rookie season. Little did we know this would be the second to the last shoey that we ever see in F1, and you can also clearly see Valtteri Bottas trying to avoid it. Even Lewis is taking it. Well, to be fair, this was before Valtteri became Australian. That was a very weird race. I remember watching this back then in 2020 and just thinking to myself after that, did I gain anything from watching this? I should have probably studied instead, because this was one of the weirdest F1 races that I've ever watched in my time. And this is coming from someone who watched the 2012 German Grand Prix. Well, that will do it for today's video. Let me know if you would like to see more story of the weekend type videos. This was kinda inspired by my video last year I made before the Singapore Grand Prix about Lewis Hamilton's pole lap. So let me know if you want to see more of these, but that'll do it for today's video. Thanks for watching and goodbye.